On this week's full-time roundup, Serie A stays tight at the top, Arsenal to continue to struggle while Man City reload, plus a few more potential coaching changes, and Daniel tells us about possibly the best championship side ever. Full-time roundup starts right now. And welcome into the latest edition of the full-time roundup. Matt Gesslin here, joined as always by my good friend Daniel Brackett. Daniel, it's 5:10 on a Sunday here in Charlotte. The sun is still beaming in my window. Winter is here, but it's also a sign of spring to come. I don't know if it makes me excited when it's not dark by 5 o'clock.
It is a plus. It was in the 50s today, so got to be outside and enjoy the weather. Played pickleball, which you were saying is only for old people, but I mean, maybe our listeners can sound off here in the comments and let that know how wrong he is about that. But it was a good weekend.
I'm going to play pickleball. I'll go ahead and just get the real court and play tennis, but neither here nor there. So that's okay. Yeah, feel free to chime away at us on pickleball, where you stand on that.
Absolutely. And we had a lot of cup games this weekend. So a lot of content to enjoy, but I felt like most of the favorites won. But we'll start with the league that was playing this weekend in Serie A. So, starting first game of the weekend, Inter scraped by with a last-second goal. It looked for a while like they were going to draw here and, maybe give Juventus a chance to sneak in. But, Lautaro Martinez being back and, they're back to winning ways.
Yeah, I mean, it was never know. I mean, Hellas Verona is not going to be one of those teams that could have put a damper on the season, but you never know. And you got to play the games, right? That's why you get out there and actually play, not just what's on paper. And they did squeak by. You texted me early in the morning and I wasn't really quite paying attention to this one. And of course, a late winner, 95th or 90 plus 5, I think it was, or 90 plus 3, for the winner there. And so, yeah, you just got to take the 3 points where you get them. A big win coming after the break and Coppa Italia. So, you got to put 3 points on the board. And then right behind them today, Daniel, Juventus, who we talked about, they played this team in the cup and won 6-1, and they squeaked by as well. So it's one of those things. Again, we kind of joked about this matchup being 4-1 or 5-0, but you got to play the games, and when you play an opponent twice in a row, that's also not surprising too. We saw that in the Premier League and Cup in England with Manchester United and West Ham earlier. So it happens, and you got to be prepared. But again, the big point here was both teams get 3 points and stay at the top 2 points of each other.
Yeah, and these teams, especially Juve, they just continue to leave it late and, be able to earn these 3 points. Maybe their luck will run out at some point this season, so they'll probably want to win more games convincingly. But, Allegri's men continue to step up to the plate when needed, and we got ourselves a Serie A title race now, which is super exciting. On the other hand of good, we have bad here. And Napoli, their fall from grace, still hungover from winning last year, and they lose 3-0 on the road to Torino. Not good.
Not good at all. And we thought, that they were kind of turning a corner at some point, and then they have another setback here. So 7th place now on the table, which is, of course, not where you want to be, especially with how far behind they are of Inter and of Juventus, which we just touched on. So, I think you touched on it a little bit with it being a hangover season. Of course, the first time in an extended time, I believe 30 plus years that they won the league last year. So you kind of take it for what it's worth. Of course, they're still in the Champions League as well. So they're still in a lot of, they're actually down to 9th now with the updated table after the games played today. So, it's a really dire situation there, but you kind of have a little bit of grace after winning the league last year. And of course you have some big players, big talents on that roster just underperforming this season, and you hope to get a little bit more out of them between now and the rest of the season.
What's concerning is Osimhen, Kvaratskhelia, maybe even Zelensky will probably be on their way out in the summer after a great year. So it'll be, how are they going to rebuild, reload, and get a manager that fits their style? So lot of questions going forward for Napoli, but should be interesting. And we're talking about a coach that's been struggling as of late, but AC Milan get a big result here against Empoli, one of the worst teams in the league, I will say, but it was a convincing 3-0 win.
Yeah, Pioli needed this one. Of course, they kind of keep in touch. Now 3 points clear of Fiorentina in third place. They were starting to lose that gap. 6 points clear of them. So they were starting to narrow that gap, and they get a little bit more separation. There's still an outside shot at the title. 9 points back of Inter. 7 points back of Juventus outside. It's an outside shot there. But again, like I said, you're kind of keeping space between you and fourth, so you keep that European spot. But again, it's still early. They can turn things around. They have the talent, and can Pioli right the ship. And he's done a lot with what's been going on, injuries, players out for various reasons. So he's done a nice job kind of riding the ship here a little bit, and kind of getting AC in a better place. Now, again, it's going to probably be looked at as a disappointment. You're out of the Champions League this year after going to the semifinals last season. You're again in third place behind your inner city rivals by 9 points. So, positives and negatives, but at this point in the season, I think third place is probably respectable for where they've been and what they have around them.
One name I'm going to shout out here, and it's a player that we love here in the United States, Christian Pulisic. 6 goals, 5 assists in 17 matches. Arguably Milan's best player this season. And it's really good to see, Pulisic have probably his best season in Europe, at least since his Dortmund days. And you also have Weston McKennie and Timothy Weah on Juventus, who are pushing for the title. So, Serie A has been really good to Americans so far. And I hope the good times continue to roll here. Now, we've been really tough on this other team that I'm about to talk about, and actually they kind of slowly and quietly climbed their way up the table, especially without their best striker, Immobile. I'm talking about Lazio. Another win this week against Udinese. They now sit 7th, right outside of Europa Conference League spot, right behind Atalanta, who drew Roma today. So this European football stack is starting to get really competitive, and it's going to be really interesting to see what teams kind of hit the ground running in 2024.
Yeah, of course, Bologna, who tied on Friday as well. They had a chance to kind of give themselves a little bit of cushion with Fiorentina for that 4th spot. But yeah, it's going to be a battle. We touched on it the last couple episodes here too. We thought AC was kind of slipping, like I said a little bit a minute ago, to kind of be in that fourth place to 6th place battle, but they've kind of righted the ship, like I just said. But yeah, you still have Fiorentina, Bologna, Atalanta, Lazio, Roma. You have 5 teams fighting for 3 spots essentially for Europe in Italy. So it'll be, a hard fought battle to the end. And all 5 teams are very talented. A couple of the teams that we talked about, just underperforming or not meeting expectations this year. So they're going to be around to the end. It's going to be a great battle in Serie A. Dan, you mentioned Christian Pulisic and the boys, Timothy Weah and Weston McKennie, of course, the American contingent. Wonder how you feel about, Serie A just as that stepping stone. Of course, it's top 5 football. They had a great season last year, not only domestically as a league, but of course in Europe, being in a lot of the major finals or semifinals as a nation. Very, a lot of work has been done at the Italian Federation to get from where it was, because I think we can all agree Italian soccer was a little bit in a bad spot more recently than not. So, I mean, is this a good place for U.S. soccer with these guys getting that play, or is it, going from the Bundesliga to the Premier League for Christian's instance, and then taking a step backwards to go to Inter or to AC Milan, excuse me. Like how do you view that going forward? Obviously it's not a weak league by any means, but it's not the Premier League or the Bundesliga.
I don't want to take anything away from, our players playing in Serie A. I would say it's, I would say the 3 leagues that are better are the Premier League, Bundesliga, and La Liga. But I mean, I feel like the quality of Serie A has improved, especially with this year, seeing, all the Italian teams going somewhat far in their respective competitions. Any playing time is good playing time. And when you play for the best team in the country, I think that's great. I mean, it was just last year when AC Milan and Inter Milan made it to the semifinals of the Champions League. So these aren't bad soccer teams. So I wouldn't take anything away from that. But I think the end goal for at a U.S. national team perspective is to have them play for the Barcelonas, Real Madrids, Liverpools, teams like that, Manchester City. So that's
and of course, I couldn't agree more with you. And I think where I was getting at was just the point of Christian and everyone, kind of riding Chelsea the way that they did for not playing him and thinking it was the club's fault. I think there's a little bit of kind of growing up as a player too. And I think you're seeing that now with taking that next step. We've talked about this before. Sometimes you need a fresh start. You're looking at a new player coming in from back to the Premier League from the Bundesliga in Timo Werner that could just use a fresh start after what he went through here that first time around. So it wasn't a knock on U.S. soccer, more just curious because I think, again, there was a lot of talk when Christian left to go to AC Milan. He needs this because he's better than Chelsea and he wasn't getting playing time. It's like, well, I think he also needed to take a little step back and kind of evaluate where he is. And like you said, be in a league that's growing and him growing as that player too. I think you're seeing him take that next step forward. Now you mentioned, on that next echelon of teams, of course, Liverpool, Daniel, was one of them. And they had a big game, the game of the weekend in the FA Cup this weekend against Arsenal. Of course, the FA Cup, we'll get to it a little bit more because it did dominate the headlines as well as the score lines this weekend. But this was the biggest game of the weekend in England, no doubt about it, Daniel. Who is this a bigger result for? Of course, if you didn't watch the game, Liverpool win out 2-0 against Arsenal, knock Arsenal out of the FA Cup. The draw will be tomorrow for round 4 ahead of Manchester United versus Wigan. But again, who is this a bigger result for, Daniel? A Liverpool side that played a second side, if you will, or an Arsenal side that have now lost 3 games in a row in all competitions?
I would say Liverpool just for the fact that this was the first game without Salah. So we needed to prove to ourselves that we can win without, the guy who's been our best player this season, arguably. So, but obviously on the flip side, Arsenal, losing 3 in a row is a crisis now for Arteta's men. Have they lost confidence in front of the net? What's going wrong with that? So it'll be interesting to see how each team responds in the next game and maybe that'll answer our question that you're asking now. But I don't know. I think it was a crucial result for both teams here.
Yeah, I think Liverpool is obviously the happier, right? You could even hear Jurgen kind of talking about it after the game in a kind of I didn't really expect to win this game type of voice. Not that they diminished the FA Cup, but of course they have a semifinal of Carabao Cup on Wednesday, which is a little further along. I think as some of these teams earlier rounds, they don't take these tournaments as seriously. And then once they hit a certain point, semifinal, final, you look at it differently. But he kind of was giddy in the way that he was talking after the game. Of course, it's a big game, so that's probably part of it. But yeah, I think Liverpool, putting out a B side, you mentioned, Mo Salah, which I don't think he was going to play in this regardless if he was available, but still good to see them score without him. I am worried about Arsenal though, Daniel. This is now, 3 in a row in all competitions. Like I said, you mentioned their struggles up front. They cannot find the back of the net. Of course, no goals today. They were held to 1 goal against Fulham and 0 against West Ham as well. So you're kind of getting concerned there. 1 win in 6, for Arteta. And the biggest thing from my perspective is that you lost to the team ahead of you directly in the table, right? Liverpool is at the top. And they're setting the standard or the pace that you need to keep up at. And you went head-to-head with them with a pretty strong lineup. If you look at Arsenal's lineup against the B-sided Liverpool, and Liverpool got the better of you. So it's kind of a double whammy here, right? You get knocked out by them, but then you're also not at the pace of the leader of the league that you're trying to win.
Yeah, I thought the most disrespectful move for this game was when it was like the 70th minute, still tied, and Jurgen makes the sub and puts on Owen Beck and Connor Bradley, the kids, for the rest of the game. And then we score, which is just hilarious. I mean, it was obvious that, Jurgen was, out of all competitions, even the commentator said this is probably the least important at this moment. So the fact that, we roll out a pretty mid XI and we still get the job done, I'm super happy about it. And this was a very winnable game for Arsenal. Arsenal probably outplayed Liverpool, to be honest. But I mean, their efficiency in front of net, you look for your big players to step up on these occasions. And I thought Bukayo Saka was nowhere to be found. Martinelli came in later. Even Trossard didn't look great. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe Nketiah could have made the difference here, but still really disappointing for Arsenal's standpoint.
It is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what Mikel Arteta does. He's got a lot of problems, not only just in his roster, but finding an 11 that he can trust to go out and get a result right now, right? And that's, as a manager, one of the scariest places to be. You're not sure who you can put out there that can get you a point, which right now they'll take. On the flip side of that, though, of course, there is a manager who knows exactly what he's getting, knows his best 11 players. And Daniel, he also added to that best 11 today. It was great to see Kevin De Bruyne come back, get a few minutes off the bench, 3 goal contributions in 15 minutes. Once he came on, they win 5-0, of course, against Huddersfield. Wasn't to be, too much of a challenge, but more so Kevin De Bruyne back, a free transfer, if you will. He hasn't played all season. And honestly, take aside the fact that he plays for Manchester City, Daniel, it's just when you get to see players of this quality playing on the pitch, it's exciting to watch, and that's why you watch the game. I mean, that assist to Doku was just world-class.
Signing of the season, I think it's fair to say, jokingly, obviously. But, yeah, this was the result I didn't want to see. They're getting healthy at the perfect time as everyone is, still working through just the fixture congestion that we have going on. It's not good. I feel like they're going to start, going on this classic Man City role of winning like 15 games in a row, and it's going to be like decide on the last day. So, I mean, it is the FA Cup, and they did play a weakened opponent, but I know I'm sure even when their subs come on, they score. So, just not a good feeling for a rival.
Yeah, and of course, you guys are looking at them right behind you on the table. You're getting a little nervous with that run that they can go on. Yeah, exactly. Another team, Daniel, of course, we don't need to harp on that one too much. That was an expected result against Huddersfield. Another expected result, Chelsea 4-0. Preston Newton end, though, kind of made it more challenging than it needed to be honest. It was, 0-0 at half, and then Chelsea opened the gates in the second half, winning 4-0. Here's the deal with this one for me, Daniel. City wins 5-0, and everyone thinks the world is great and hunky-dory. Chelsea win 4-0. Yes, the first half was terrible. So was the first half for City. By the way, this is not a comparison to say Chelsea are anywhere near the same level of Manchester City. But we win 4-0, and the world kind of feels like it was a ho-hum. Oh, yeah, that was not really that impressive of a game. I mean, Chelsea scored 4 goals in the game. I mean, to me, that's an impressive stat in itself. So I was super impressed with the youngsters that came on. It was a poor first half, like I said, and a few of the academy kids came on that are young. Like I said, some youngsters that were going to get some minutes at this point of a tournament, and they really changed the game. And it looked like there was some elements that Chelsea could find going forward. It's not there yet, but this was a perfect type of game to kind of see what you have and who could come in for you for the long term.
Chelsea 4, Preston 0, 4th tie banner. I'm going to get that for your wall since you feel so upset about Twitter not talking about your Chelsea.
What disrespect? What disrespect?
Hey, keep that disrespect. It's obviously working, keeping the chip on the shoulder for them. So, hey, let's win. Let's try to win 2 in a row now. Let's use this as a launching pad. That's the thing with Chelsea that we never seem to get is you get a couple wins and then it's always a step back. So we'll see. But I'm glad the boys got a win for you. We also want to hit on the beauty of the cup. So 6th tier advance to the 4th round. Wrexham versus Shrewsbury. Bristol City gets a point against West Ham. So a nice draw there, kind of punching above their weight. You were kind of tough on Moyes midweek, and you seem like you know what you're talking about after this result.
Yeah, and the beauty of the cup too is just like you said. I mean, the fact that some of these teams, Maidstone is a 6th tier team, and they come in and they advance, to the 5th round, which is amazing. Again, to just put that in perspective, because a lot of you guys have now been following Wrexham for the great story out there. This league is below where Wrexham was, and they are now into the 5th round of the FA Cup. I mean, that is what that. Again, we don't have this in this country quite yet. We thought we were getting it with the U.S. Open Cup. And that's what you want from, a tournament like the U.S. Open Cup, where basically this is the equivalent of a Thursday night men's league coming to play, against the biggest teams in the country. So that's why we enjoy the Cup, especially these early round games. When again, you're not getting big name teams, you'll get them eventually. Same with the Carabao Cup. It starts early with some poor squads, and now you're at the semifinals where you're really, the headliners a little bit. So it's just a beautiful tournament, and why we love the sport. Of course, this happens in all leagues and in all countries in Europe. So we're just focusing on the FA Cup right now, but just a tournament, Daniel, that I know I enjoy thoroughly, and I know a lot of people that love the sport really enjoy it for this purpose. Again, like I said, that you never know. You get an opportunity to play, and you put the best 11 out there, and any given day you can beat whoever you're playing against.
Give me the Cinderella story every single time. I love it. I love it. Now we got Carabao Cup predictions here. First game on the docket on Tuesday's Chelsea versus Middlesbrough. We just talked about let's get a couple wins in a row. This is the perfect opportunity for you guys to do that.
It is, and also it's a big one in the sense that this is a two-legged semifinal as well. So could Chelsea put a good performance on Tuesday and give themselves some space for the second leg to not have to worry or kind of put out a lesser squad, especially given the congestion. Now, we're not as congested as, say, Liverpool, who have, Europa as well as part of their schedule, but you still don't want to have to be playing as many games with your starting lineup if you don't have to. Of course, Chelsea play Fulham on the weekend in the Premier League as well, so you're looking ahead at that way. So again, Middlesbrough being a championship side, you want to see a good secondary performance coming out of Preston. But also, again, you want to kind of put this one to bed early. I think we do. I think there's a good chance that this one is 2-0 early. And again, doesn't sound like much, but 2-0 in a two-legged draw is a huge, huge positive. So I'm going to go 2-0, and especially since it's, in Middlesbrough. So that would be big as well. And then, Fulham and Liverpool for me. This one is kind of a coin flip, not going to lie, because it depends on what Jurgen's going to put out there with, again, you guys are going on a break. You'll have your winter break here as you don't have a Premier League game on the weekend, but you just had a big game, which, you did play a lot of your players that you needed to, especially with Virgil sick and a couple other guys out. So that'll be interesting to me. I still think you guys get it done. Probably, 2-1 or 3-1. It's a tougher opponent than a Middlesbrough though, for sure.
It is. So I'm going to also back Chelsea in this game. I think it will be a little bit more difficult being at Borough. They're going to really sit back and, try to survive the first 60 minutes and then really go at Chelsea. So if you can get an early goal, I feel like that really puts away the tie. And then for the Liverpool game, I think Jota got off the bench today. I think he'll start, which will be really good for, putting balls in the back of the net. He just has that knack of whenever he's on the field, he scores or assists or has a goal contribution. I'm going to back us. I'm going to say 3-1. I really think, like you said, Liverpool's going to want to get the tie done early as soon as possible. So I think they're going to come out the gate swinging. We get an extra day of rest. Thank you, Carabao Cup, for that. I appreciate it. And hopefully we, see you in the final.
And there's one other cup I want to talk about too that's happening. Similarly kind of thing to the Carabao Cup is the Spanish Supercopa, which is this week as well, Daniel. That is Wednesday and Thursday. Of course, the big one on Wednesday is Real Madrid versus Atletico Madrid. Any thoughts there? And then the second day on Thursday is going to be Barcelona versus I always get this one wrong. Osasuna. And so which way, of course, Barcelona took care of business today. It was never easy as always, but of the two, give me a winner in Real Madrid, Atletico, and then Barcelona, Osasuna.
Ooh, I'm going to go, they're going all the way to Saudi Arabia as well. I didn't realize that. But all right, so I'm going to do Real Madrid and I'm going to do Barcelona. Give me an El Clasico final.
Added to the list. We had a few last year as well. That'll be a great way to kind of cap it off again. The final is that weekend as well, so that'll be interesting if they can keep it. They would play on, I believe, Sunday would be the final for that one, so keep an eye out for that. But Daniel, of course, it's been a weird schedule of late, as you can imagine, folks, with cups and festive fixtures and teams and leagues taking breaks. We do have the return of the Bundesliga this week, though, so we'll cover that on our Thursday show, give you some predictions. We'll recap and remind you where that league sits, as it's been over 3 weeks since they played any games, but it's still a fun league to get back into. And then we'll have our normal schedule. So things will return back to normal. We'll have, midweek games that we'll cover on Thursday, prediction show on Thursday, and we'll have a full slate of domestic leagues going every single weekend from here on out, as we are now back into the swing of things. But on the other side of the break, we are going to start talking about a few more just general discussion items, Daniel. I know this is something that we've wanted to do as part of the show, and so we have a few that we want to chat with you guys. Of course, you can follow us and interact with us on X at Fulltime Roundup. Let us know how you think of any of these topics that we're talking about. Chime in, get involved. As also download, like, subscribe the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star rating. And on the other side of the break, like I said in the tease, Daniel is going to tell us about maybe the best championship side ever. So if you're a little bit into some championship history, stick around. We'll be right back after the break. And welcome back. Like I said, as we went into the break, Daniel, we are trying to play around with some new segments this year, trying to change things up on the show. Of course, we're still evolving, learning how to do this ourselves, and we love you guys for listening for as long as you have and as much as you have. But we want to get a little bit more into broader discussions as part of the show, so you guys can understand where we sit on football, as well as just give you guys some views of some of the storylines that are out there this year. And there's constantly storylines throughout the year. And sometimes Daniel makes some stuff up. Sometimes I make some stuff up, and we chat about it as hypothetical. So that'll be part of this segment. And of course, again, you can interact with us on X. Let us know. This will not take part or place of our XI of the week. That will be back as well. Like I said before the break, we are back to our normal ways as far as schedule is concerned. So the first topic, Daniel, of course, I think one that we haven't touched on quite yet, but a big one in the world of soccer, is that Carlo Ancelotti was scheduled, or basically primed, to take the Brazilian national manager role after the season in the summer. Well, things have changed. He has now signed a contract at Real Madrid till 2026. So we are looking at arguably the biggest national squad in the terms of the sport without a manager. And I'm curious who you think are going to replace, a very interesting, role, and where this job has been the last couple seasons.
It's one of those roles that you have to hit the ground running, because the fans will turn on you fast. So they're going to have to really look into who they want to coach this team. And we kind of made a list of names here, and, stop me when you find one that you like. But obviously, I would say one of the big fish or big names that have been mentioned is Jose Mourinho. He doesn't have any international experience, but he's, I think one of the better coaches of all time in a cup format. So would this be the right coach for you, in your opinion?
For me, I think it's a tricky one, right? There's also of course, with Carlo Ancelotti, he was going to break this mold, but there's always been a desire to have a Brazilian manager of the Brazilian national team, right? You don't see a lot of it come outside of that Brazilian bubble too often. So the fact that they entertained Carlo Ancelotti was a big deal. Jose Mourinho, of course, speaks Portuguese, being from Portugal, which helps a little bit with the language, especially in Brazil. It would be a good hire, of course, from his role and perspective. It's one of the biggest hires and managerial career roles he would have had. Of course, he's been and done it all, and he doesn't have a national team title on his CV. There was talk at one point, I thought, of maybe him coming and being the men's national team, U.S. men's national team manager, which would have been a good fit. I think that time has passed. Yeah, I mean, if I'm him, how can you turn down Brazil if they come asking, right? Of course, he's been saying that hasn't been the case. There's been no contact from them. He loves being in Roma. There was, recent discussion of him thinking he was going to end up in Saudi Arabia managing. I think he basically said it's a done deal. I'm going to end up there at some point. So yeah, I mean, but from my perspective, he would be a great fit for them and would get the most out of that squad. Totally different experience, right, as a national manager than it is a domestic manager.
Oh, it's completely different. But if you have, I feel like the cup experience as a club manager is the most important track record to have, and I feel like he
And
checks that box.
he's the master of the club of the tournament, right? In the knockout
Yeah,
tournament. So
another name, not Brazilian, like you said, but Jorge Sampaoli was the Argentina coach, has some experience with Chile as well. Do you think he'd be a good fit?
yeah, he knows the region, right? And I think again, it's going to be one of those things if they want to look outside of a Brazilian name, you have to look probably within Comebol a little bit. Who are the hot managers there, and who's kind of up and coming, especially some of these smaller. Chile's not small, but it's not a powerhouse like an art. You wouldn't go after Lionel Scalini, right? You're not going to get him to come in and take the role, and you're not going to be able to get the guy from Bielsa from Uruguay. Like he's not going to move laterally,
Yeah,
right? So you're going to have to look at Peru and again, so I'm just not too versed in who's available down there. But I think that you're looking at like Palmieri's coach. Is he a fit that could
yeah,
be because like that's
Abel
kind of who you're.
Ferreira.
Yeah, like you're kind of looking at managers like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's another one I wanted to throw out there. He was also in the Brazilian league as well. Renato Gaucho. He's the Grêmio coach. They did really well this season, especially just being promoted and outperforming their status. So that's another Brazilian name that you could throw out. There's a really weird one. I don't think it would happen, but Conceição, the Porto coach, he's Portuguese. He speaks the language, so maybe they could go after him as a coach that could be a good hire. But it's gonna be really interesting because it's not like Brazil to kind of be a mess, and I feel like they need to figure out this coaching hire ASAP as Copa America is just a few months away.
Just around the corner. And you mentioned just how much of a mess they are, but I think they're not that far off, right? Because of course, if you look at it on paper, they're still arguably one of the most talented rosters in the world. And so you just have to find that manager that understands and finds a way for them to play. Now, Neymar is not going to be available for you for Copa America. That's already ruled out as far as medical from the doctors. So, you're looking at Vinny and Rodrigo, of course, Richarlison up top. It's tough to place Neymar, but you still have all that talent there. And so if you're looking at someone to come in, of course, Carlo Ancelotti would have been perfect because he has the experience with some of those high name profile players. He works with Vinny and Rodrigo daily. So, again, though, you're looking at someone that comes in there. If they find the right hire, it's still, yes, the pressure is amped up by tenfold because it's Brazil, but you're not looking at a complete rebuild of a squad and no talent and loss of a generation of players. I think it's just how do you find that manager that can put them in the right place, in the right position, and kind of excel that way. I mean, someone that, Daniel, I know this is an interesting one. I want to get your take on it because you mentioned something to me earlier and I was wondering why you mentioned it. This could be a little bit where you're leaning. I'm not sure. But you mentioned to me that Pep Guardiola could be his last season at Manchester City. Would he take something like this on? And would that be
Absolutely?
I mean, could they ever lose if he manages Brazil?
Yeah, that's like the craziest one you could throw out if he, was. I think he could, and we can just dive right into it, I guess. I think this is Pep's last season at City. I don't know why I think that. I just feel like after he had a whole press conference after the Club World Cup, and he mentioned how he hit every single trophy there was to win. They just won the treble. They'll probably get some silverware. After this year, I feel like this would be a good time to walk away if you want to walk away at all. With the FFP, maybe that kind of scares him off. Whenever that hits, he's jumping ship. But maybe he could go coach a national team like Brazil, or he could go to New York City FC, and he loves New York, and he could coach in MLS and be the first best coach to ever coach in MLS and make waves like Messi did when he came into MLS this year. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Or he could just stay in Europe and coach Barcelona if Xavi was to step down.
It's an interesting thought. I mean, I do think about it a little bit to your point. I mean, he's won everything. Of course, we've been hearing people talk about it at length, and yes, I get it. I would love to see it too, but there's no way he's going to do something like this where he goes and manages like a Burnley, or not,
No.
the equivalent of a Burnley, and takes them to Manchester City levels, which would be phenomenal. I think he has the skills. He obviously is one of the smartest, most tactically aware, savvy managers in the world. So I don't think it's a matter of that. I just think he would never take on a project like that. Because why would he do that and diminish his potential career? National job makes sense to me if he's going to leave Manchester City. It's an interesting one. I do agree with you. What will happen once those FIFA fair play punishments come down, and what the FA makes the ruling for Manchester City? Will he leave then? How does that look if he just jumps ships and it's like, hey, see ya, thanks for all these trophies, now you guys get to hold the shit in my bag that I'm leaving you with? New York City is an interesting one. Of course, he's part of the city football group with Manchester City, and so there's connection there. It would be a great fit for the MLS. I think it would be fantastic for the MLS as far as just name and profile. Would the league allow some of the changes that he would want? Of course, as a manager with expectations, that's a different conversation. And maybe when he does make that move at that point in time, the league is in a different place. But yeah, I mean, when you texted me this, I was kind of at first taken aback, but there is some potential to it. I just don't see other than taking just a year off because he's done it for so long and he's seen everything. Like, what is the actual benefit of him just saying, you know what, guys, thanks for this. I'm gonna pack up and roll my ship down the street.
When you're the best, you can do what you want. So we've seen plenty of legends step away whenever they felt like it was time. They don't.
But he's got so much to do. Like, he's still a young guy. He's only in his early 60s.
But he's won everything, right?
He's won everything. Yeah, maybe that young. I mean, I might be giving him too many years, but he's won everything, and he's not old as a manager is concerned. He's still very, very young.
Another team that this is kind of crazy, but his brother is the chairman of Girona. Could he go back? He has a stake himself in Girona. Could he go back to Catalan and coach there?
That would be amazing.
Barcelona. That'd be cool, right?
And to that point, and because I love
Citigroup,
but also where I was going to go next with you is if Xavi gets fired or leaves, which ultimately you're hearing rumblings going on within the La Liga news and circles that this is his job is kind of on the line this year. I think personally, if you're asking if we were talking about who's going to replace him, I think the manager from Girona would be that top pick for Barcelona. It's within Catalonia, which is a big deal. He obviously is making the most of what he has, which is a very limited resources. And Barcelona, God knows right now that they are in a better place, but they're still fighting with limited resources. I don't think Pep can go back just because he's already done it once. So I don't think that there would be any interest there to do that. And I think that would make sense. If Xavi gets let go and things cascade that way, I think that would be fantastic if Pep went to Girona and just continued building what they have there. I think you could look at a power like Girona for a long time based on what they're doing right now if that happens.
But on the flip side of that, Barcelona haven't won the Champions League in almost a decade now. They did win La Liga last year, but they're not the same Barca as they were. So could Pep, come back in after dominating in his era and then, another stamp of approval? Barcelona made him. That is his home. So you always have that. Agree. It's going to be really interesting to what Pep does in the next few years, because I do think that this City chapter is winding down for him. He's been there for a while now, if you think about it.
He has. And there's two more I want to discuss with you real quick, because we alluded to one the other day, and of course the Ancelotti news changes things for him. Is Xabi Alonso, and where could he go? Of course, there's a lot of rumors right now floating out there, and they're pretty concrete. And I'm not going to be surprised if this does happen, because this has kind of always been the plan a little bit, was for him to go to Bayern Munich to some extent. And it sounds like that the Bayern Munich hierarchy want that to happen this summer as well after Tuchel's contract signs out. Is that a done deal for you, or is there another club that he just fits at? Of course, I think with Real Madrid now closed, Bayern just makes the most logical sense to me.
Bayern or Barca, those are the two names.
Would he go to Barca though after being a Real Madrid legend? Like, is that possible?
still an attractive job, and he is Spanish, so I don't know. I guess he's probably a Madrista, so that would be a big move for the headlines. But I mean, I feel like Bayern's way more likely.
It does make sense. And then the other one I wanted to get your thoughts on before we hear your take on the arguably the greatest championship side of all time, which I can't wait for, is Allegri in at Juventus. Of course, we've talked about Allegri ball and how much we just don't like the style of play. They still sit second in the table though, and there are concrete rumors and rumblings of him leaving as well. If that does happen, regardless if they are second or not in Champions League positions, who do you see replacing Allegri at Juventus?
Zinedine Zidane. That's my big name. He played at Juventus for a while. I mean, I feel like the two teams he'd go to is France and Juve. And if it looks like Didier Deschamps doesn't want to leave after Euros, then I feel like he could, take this job. It really depends on how France does. And Deschamps thought about leaving before the Euros, but decided to stay on. Do you think he would want to do another cycle?
I don't think another cycle, but I think to your point, if you see him do well at the Euros, I think it would be harder for them to get rid of him before the World Cup.
Yeah.
Unless it's his choice to walk away, which again, I'm not going to speculate for where he's thinking about it. It changes things when you win too, right? If they win this tournament, and he said that before, okay, but now we won, we were in a semifinal, we're in a final, and we won it at the World Cup. And then so there could be a little bit of payback and wanting to win that next one in 2026. I mean, everyone knows Zizou is lined up for that job. It's just a matter of when. And so if there is an opportunity for him because Deschamps is not ready and he can go to Juventus and get a couple years under his belt and kind of refine his tools. Of course, he hasn't managed since Real Madrid a few years now. I think that's a good move for him. He played there. He's a legend of the club. We know he doesn't like English or doesn't speak that much English. So Premier League's probably out. I think that would make sense for him to go there and give it a year and a half until after 2026. Again, a lot's going to depend on the summer with Didier Deschamps and the way that the French national team goes. But those are really the only two options for him is France and maybe a team like Juventus, like you said.
My other name was Thiago Motta. There's also been links with him leaving Bologna and going to Juventus in the summer.
He's done a fantastic job.
So I think if I'm Juventus, number one is Zidane. Number two is probably Thiago Motta.
And there's going to be a lot of new rumors going around. Of course, dominoes will take shape and teams will leave and things will happen, and we'll keep you posted as much as we can. None of this is concrete or actually happening, probably other than the Xabi Alonso one to Bayern Munich, but we'll keep you posted if we hear anything else. Just wanted to kind of discuss it and see what your take was, Daniel, on some of the managers that we've talked about. But now, like I said a couple times, there was a discussion about a team in the championship, of course, Leicester City, who famously won the Premier League coming out of nowhere, similar to what Girona is doing right now in the La Liga table. And of course, they got relegated last season as part of the regular promotion relegation in Premier League. And now they play in the championship, one tier down from the Premier League. And Daniel, you told me this morning that they are the greatest team in the English championship of all time based on points, and walk us through what that looks like and where they are. Of course, you would almost guarantee their promotion back to the Premier League, correct? Based off what you're seeing.
That is true. I'd say on track to be. So I was taking a look. I did, a little research within the past decade. So right now, 26 games played out of 46. Wait, is it 46? I can't always remember how many games there's played, but anyways, they have 65 points. So with that, Burnley technically is the best. Yeah, 46 matches played. They were the best last year of all time. They broke 100 points. We're at 101. Most teams historically are in the 90s. So right now, I took a look at Burnley with 101 points, and Burnley won 29 games, drew 14, and had 3 losses. So if you're going off 46 matches, they won 29. Leicester have already won 21. So they're still, that's only 8 wins. And you have, almost 20-something games left. So they are on a better track than Burnley, and they have a very deep squad, probably the best squad that we've seen in the championship. They honestly did not do that much selling in the summer. They've made some good loan signings. Casadei from Chelsea's the heart of that midfield, and Vardy's still there having a party like always. So I wanted to bring this to light just because of what they've been doing. Obviously, when you get to the finish line, that's when teams start to slip. That's when Burnley slipped last year. But they are not far away. So, I'll probably check back in on this in late February to see. But I think 105 is not a ridiculous, point total goal that they could have.
Yeah, it's a remarkable story. Of course, they're 10 points clear of Ipswich right now for that second promotion, guaranteed spot. The championship is one of the tables that everyone always keeps an eye on as an English fan. You never know who's going to go down or who's going to come up, and so you always keep an eye on those teams. Southampton, a notoriously strong Premier League side as well, are in third place. Of course, they would have to go into a playoff.
The best.
2 through 6 is always fantastic with that playoff. A team that's near and dear to one of our friends' heart. Norwich City is only 5 points out of that playoff spot, so hopefully they can make a little bit of a run and get in there. And who knows? You have clubs like Sunderland, who just played Newcastle the other day, and a notoriously massive club. If you don't know about what happened to Sunderland, go check out that story. But of course, you have clubs like Middlesbrough, and it's just a fantastic league year in, year out. Some of the most historic names of all time in
Leeds
that league.
Too.
It leads as well. And so it's just a fun league to keep an eye on. You mentioned it's a longer schedule just because there are a few more teams that play in that. And so, yeah, I mean, 10 points clear of Ipswich at the top is fantastic. Like you said, that roster is still pretty strong from their Premier League days. Of course, they have a few new players, a few players lost, like James Maddison. But when you still replace that, in Kieran Dewsbury Hall, who was fantastic before they went down. Dennis Pratt's still there. Jamie Vardy, like you mentioned. They're still the class of the championship, and it will be interesting to see if they get 105 points. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll talk more championship as it gets closer. Again, the impacts of the 3 teams that go up with the 3 teams that will go down from the Premier League. So we'll keep you posted on all that. And of course, it seems like Leicester will be part of that story for the entire season. And so, Daniel, it's been a pleasure. We're back to regular scheduling. Like I said before, all games are going to be kind of back in swing, or all leagues will be back in swing this next weekend. And so we'll have a Thursday prediction show for you. Of course, Bundesliga's back. We'll get some of those games on the docket. We'll look and review some of the midweek Carabao Cup games with Chelsea and Liverpool both playing. And until then, hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you on Thursday.